Great to be talking again with Geoff about what's going on in finance.
Hi Bryce, good to see you.
What would you say to a young person finishing HSC this year? What would you say to try and encourage them to go and become a financial planner?
Yeah.
I feel like that sub-segment of the broader financial services sector has been beaten up so heavily over the last, well, not just Royal Commission, I mean, we've had dozens of inquiries. How do we encourage people to come into this as a profession where there's a purpose to help Australians?
I smile because I think it's 29 inquiries we've had in the last decade into the largest single contributor to GDP. Not one of those inquiries has been to help it. It's actually all to hinder it, quite frankly. What would you say? Well, I'd say come and join a wonderful profession. You know, because advice should be, and financial planning, no different to accounting and being a lawyer. They're professions. This is a new profession. It's going to be treated that way. It's got very high educational standards, ongoing professional standards. You get a wonderful opportunity to apply your technical mind as well as your practical self to help people solve problems and live well in retirement. So that will happen. It is happening, but we've got to reframe it to being a profession just like an accountant and just like a lawyer. That's why I think a big part of the future of advice in this country has to be employed financial planners. It just has to be. It can't be the cottage industry that we've had for 3 or 4 decades.
You touched on a few things there where if you're talking to a young person to try and become a financial planner, that really touch on purpose and the idea of providing dignified retirements for Australians. One thing that we've talked about before is we don't, 30 years into compulsory super, we still haven't really landed on what is the purpose of super. And it seems to be we have all of these skirmishes ongoing between both sides of politics and no one's addressing that key tenet.
It's a really good point because we agreed about a decade ago with bipartisan agreement to define the purpose of super. The 2 ministers, I remember that happening. And I thought, well, that's the way forward because even a decade ago when the system was about half of what it is now as a golden pot, we knew where it was going. And I think there's a lot of ways you can focus on what's the purpose of super once it's not defined. Some people go straight to, well, it's all about getting people off the pension. Well, is it in whole or in part? Is it about creating a wonderful capital base for investment in infrastructure and in employment and underpinning our economy actually and our overall credit rating because of the strength of our superannuation system? But if we had that purpose, we wouldn't be arguing the toss over it because we would have already said and giving clarity to exactly what it's here for.
You've always been able to access your super in times of hardship, but during COVID, really those settings were just changed more than anything.
That's right.
We did see tens of billions of dollars come out of the system, although out of a $3 trillion system, it was not a huge amount. Yeah. But we've also heard from some other people we've spoken to that their members who were withdrawing, they weren't withdrawing 20,000 because they didn't have 20,000. They've withdrawn 6, 7, 8,000. They've cleaned their accounts out. And then now we've got some politicians talking about, you should be able to access that to get to your house first. Be interested in your views on one, how do we encourage young people to put that money back in or get back in? And 2, should we be able to access it for housing?
Just one thing to comment on there maybe, Bryce. You're absolutely right. And when we're talking about in COVID moving to change hardship, it was off a base of there already being early release. So people sort of forget that a little bit. It's good that you remind us. And secondly, in my old role, I read many letters, inquiries and listened to calls from people who were calling for that money because they were desperate to have it. So let's not forget that either. It did serve a purpose. There's no doubt there was others just saw as a chance for me to get 10 grand or 20 grand or any part thereof. So that's happened now. So what do we want to think about hardship going forward? We shouldn't lose sight that there's a really important need for trustees to be able to give people money in hardship. I think when we come to now this debate around housing, again, if we pick up the purpose of super and we can think about, and there was a time we did talk about, how do I get earlier release for different things as I age and live and work longer? We were talking about re-education. We were talking about early release to help different family members in different situations as well. Now, maybe that gets a bit too technical, and I think that's where I fear the whole early release for homes will come to. What the rules that will be written around that end up very complex, really complex. So is it, how much of a percent, is it the sole owner that I have to be in? How much of a percentage of the house do I otherwise have to own? What's my first home? Is it only for first homes? You know, the administration of that will cost more than the benefit of it.
And this seems to be a problem that happens over and over again.
Every
It's
time.
something that sounds like a great headline, bereft of the detail around how that could actually be implemented by the system, misses the big point that it'll cost more than it'll solve. Plus, I don't think there's too many young people who've got $6,000 that's going to make the difference, to be honest.
Yeah, no. So again, if we can define the purpose of super, we can define equally how I could get early access to super in certain situations, particularly now that we're all living for longer and we're working for longer.
Rather than rating the super, are there other policy settings that you could see that would be better, particularly in that drawdown phase? I mean, I know that a lot of the rhetoric around we've still got just as many people on the pension as we already had is counting people who get $1 of pension as being on the pension. Is there something? Are there other things rather than just rating the honeypot that could be done to make that transition better?
Yeah, I think that data is skewed, right? There's no doubt that if you go and see a good financial planner, they'll optimise and maximise your pension with your other assets. That's their job.
Yep.
And so that's the rules within a boundary, and that's okay. So we've got to be careful how that data is utilised. Yeah, I think we still haven't done enough on the accumulation phase, actually. You know, now that we've got caps, why have overall caps? Why have annual caps at all? Why not just let me to get there as quickly as I can? You know, particularly when we talk about women in the workforce and being out of the workforce as a carer and then coming back in, how do they catch up? Well, why are they caught by annual limits at all?
Yep, I agree.
Why can't they, if we've got a cap at 1.7, I think it's now indexed to, the sooner you get there, the better.
Yep.
Why is that a problem?
Yeah.
Maybe that's going to encourage younger people who might have taken some money out during COVID to when they're in their 30s and 40s with an ability or an inheritance to put more money into super quickly.
We've mentioned the trustees and, you know, the whole fiduciary system and trust system that we're built on here for our super system seem to be thrown up a little bit through the Royal Commission. Do you think that anyone would, number one, go and be a trustee on a super fund anymore? But secondly, are we increasing the level of competency that we have to have with those trustees as an outcome?
Look, I think trustees do a really good job across the board. I think the level of skills and experience is always growing. And, you know, the role of chair, like chair of any board, is to ensure that you've got the right skills matrix, you've got the right diversity of thinking, right diversity of skills, right diversity of background. And, you know, that bar, I think, is high in this country. You know, I'm not sure the Royal Commission or any of the recommendations, there's been no law that's actually changed the fiduciary role or specifically the role of the trustee per se, but it's made it clearer that trustees are on the hook at the end of the day. And it's more the, you know, plaintiff litigant firms that have, you know, accelerated, if you like, their view of what the role of a trustee would be and a fiduciary in that situation. And, you know, they've got the reasonable man test as a trustee. It's a higher bar, but, you know, it's not without good experience, skills, and, you know, I can guarantee you lots of documentation on governance and documentation on process that decisions are made.
Thanks very much for your time. We could talk about this stuff all day. Really appreciate your insights.
That's my pleasure.